Welcome everyone, I'm Laura Shu. In this video, I'll show you what's new in version 7 of the program now called Lightroom Classic. This is the same program we've known by the name of Lightroom for the past 10 years. Today, Adobe also released a brand new cloud-based application that they're choosing to call Lightroom CC. Watch my separate video introduction to Lightroom CC for more on that. Now, I fear that these naming decisions by Adobe will create a lot of confusion for a long time to come, but I don't want to get sidetracked on that topic in this video. There's much more on my blog. Lightroom Classic 7 is only available as a subscription. There won't be any more perpetual versions. The subscription is still $9.99 a month in the US for Classic plus Photoshop, or you can pay more to also get the cloud-based Lightroom CC program. Again, there's more on my blog. If you're coming from the perpetual version of Lightroom 6, keep in mind that you'll also get the features that were added to the subscription version of Lightroom 6 over the past 2 years, including dehaze, panorama boundary warp, local blacks and whites, and guided upright. I won't be covering those features here though. Now, in terms of new features, the Lightroom Classic 7 release is pretty light. We have a great new feature in the Develop module called Range Mask. We have a small improvement to Auto Mask in the adjustment brush, an embedded previews workflow to help you cull through your photos faster, several important performance improvements, and then some miscellaneous small additions. I'll cover them in that order. Let's go to the Develop module. Now, you probably know that the adjustment brush, radial filter, and graduated filter allow us to make changes to local areas in our photos. The new Range Mask feature available in all three of these tools allows us to further narrow down the area that we're going to affect by specifying a range of colors or a range of tones. I want to work on the building, which happens to be shades of red. Of course, the power pole is also reddish orange, so I'm going to need to specify this more precisely. With the graduated filter, I'll click and drag from left to right, and I'll type O so you can see the overlay. So right now we're affecting everything to the left of where I clicked and dragged. Now under Range Mask, I'll click on the drop down and choose Color. I'll grab the eyedropper, and then I'll click and drag to sample in the reds. Now I'll hold the Shift key down, and I'll click and drag in a couple other areas of red. It looks like I have negative clarity going on here. I'll reset that. By the way, I have a separate video that specifically focuses on how to use Range Mask, so it'll go into all the details. Here I just want you to be exposed to it. I'll hold the Alt or the Option key down, and I'll slide to the left to restrict the range of colors that this adjustment will affect. So it's very easily able to isolate the change to just the areas I want to affect. Of course, I could erase the areas in the bushes to get it even more precisely defined. Now I can go ahead and increase saturation, increase clarity, make any changes that I want to make. Now I'll quickly show you the Luminance Range Mask. Luminance is brightness and darkness, and this Range Mask allows us to narrow down our edit to a particular range of tones. I'm going to darken the window in this photo. I'll use the adjustment brush. I'll make a rough selection of the area, and I'll come down to Range Mask, click on the drop down, and choose Luminance. Now I only want to affect the darkest tones in this area. So I'll narrow the range of tones until I've isolated the change to just the window. You can also use the Alt or the Option key as I slide this. Now I'll type O for overlay to turn that red overlay off. I'll double click on Effect to reset the sliders, and I'll just use negative exposure. Finally, I can adjust smoothness to make the edges more harsh or more soft. So I really love this new feature. Again, watch my separate video for more details. Now we also have a small improvement in Auto Mask, which is in the adjustment brush. In Lightroom 6, I defined this area under the birdhouse and I brightened it, and I used Auto Mask to protect me from spilling over into the gray. But notice all the little specks. Well, That's because of noise. This photo is very noisy, and AutoMask thought that some of those specks of noise were edges that needed to be protected. So I get a very blotchy result. I'm going to delete this adjustment, and before I do any more adjustment brush work, I'll go down to the detail panel and I'll reduce the noise. Now in the adjustment brush, I'll turn on AutoMask, and as I click and drag, you'll see that AutoMask now respects noise reduction. So it's no longer detecting those pieces of noise as areas to be protected. Because this change could affect the appearance of photos that you used AutoMask on in earlier versions of Lightroom, they're not automatically updated. This required a new process version. I'm not going to delve into it here, but bottom line, if you have photos on which you've already used AutoMask and you want those to update to using the improved version, you'll need to click on the little lightning bolt that you'll see here. Otherwise, when you see the lightning bolt, it will disappear automatically next time you edit that photo. Alright, let's talk about the new embedded previews workflow. You've probably had the experience of importing photos, and then as you start moving from photo to photo, you see the loading message. Well, Lightroom is building the JPEG copies of your photos that it just maintains behind the scenes for convenience, and you're having to wait while it does that. There's good news on two fronts with respect to this. First, building of standard and one-to-one previews is significantly faster in Lightroom Classic than it was in Lightroom 6. So you may not see that loading message. If you do continue to see it, you can use an alternative workflow called the embedded previews workflow that will allow you to cull your photos using the JPEGs that are embedded in your camera. Lightroom will fetch those and allow you to work with them so that you don't have to wait for Lightroom to build its own previews. I'll show that to you quickly, but I do have a separate detailed video. In the import dialog, under Build Previews, you'll choose Embedded and Sidecar. Otherwise, your import settings will be exactly the same. And as soon as you start seeing thumbnails appear in the grid, you can start working through these photos, giving pick and reject flags, stars, etc. And you won't see that loading message. You'll see the embedded preview message here and icons here indicating that you're working with embedded previews. The images may look different because the JPEGs your camera creates use all of your in-camera settings and RAW files don't, but that may be a small price to pay to be able to work faster. Ultimately, when you go to the Develop module, Lightroom will render its own previews, or you can click on one of the icons and tell Lightroom to build the previews now. So watch my separate video on the embedded preview workflow for more important details on this topic. Now let's talk about performance improvements. Anytime there are performance improvements, some people are going to experience them more than other people. So I'll give you an idea of what's been improved, and then you'll just have to see what your experience is like based on your system. Now you probably have already noticed that starting Lightroom is faster. Loading that catalog is faster. I mentioned building of standard and one-to-one previews as part of the import process is now faster. Moving from image to image in the library module. Loading of thumbnails in the grid and in loop view. The grid will also populate more quickly when you move from one collection to another. Importing from another catalog. Deleting a collection. Also faster. Now when you do multiple HDR and panorama merges, these are now added to a queue, and they're only started if CPU usage falls below a threshold. So this will make Lightroom more responsive while you have those merges in progress. The first time you go from library to develop in your session should be faster. You'll also find that moving from image to image and loading those images in the develop module should be faster. Finally, those that have GPU acceleration turned on in preferences and have the latest operating systems and video cards should also see some improvement in local adjustment responsiveness, spot healing responsiveness, and fewer color glitches as you slide sliders. Alright, let's move on to some of the smaller changes. I'm going to go to the Import dialog. In Import, we now have a sort option by file type. So if you're trying to isolate your JPEGs, for example, to deselect them so that they won't get imported, this can come in handy. You can now also import Photoshop Elements 2018 catalogs. And there are more cameras supported now for tethered capture, importing as you shoot with your camera connected. Read my blog post for the list of cameras. In Smart Collections, we have a couple new criteria. A Smart Collection is a rule-based collection. We can now specify title is or is not empty. We could previously do that with some of the other metadata fields. In addition, we have develop lens profile corrections. So we can isolate images that do or do not have a lens profile applied. In the Export dialog, there is another metadata option to include all except camera raw information. Camera raw information is a text record of the editing we've done to our files. Well, if you don't want anybody to be able to read that, you can choose all except camera raw information. If you're curious what this camera raw information looks like, take a raw file that you've edited into Photoshop and go to File, File Info, and look at the Raw Data tab. Alright, just a couple more small ones here. In Preferences, so Lightroom Preferences on the Mac, Edit Preferences on the PC. On the Performance tab, the Camera Raw cache has been increased to 5. When you edit images, they're added to the Camera Raw cache so that if you go back to them in the near future, Lightroom doesn't have to re-render them from scratch. So having a larger cache will help improve develop responsiveness. The Lightroom Mobile tab has been renamed Lightroom CC to reflect the entire Lightroom CC ecosystem now of the cloud-based Lightroom CC program along with Lightroom Mobile and Web. But the settings here are the same as they were in Lightroom 6. Finally, the video framework used to render videos has been updated. I can't even tell you what that means, except to say that if you import Apple's live photos, you won't see green frames around those videos anymore. So that's it for the highlights of what's new in Lightroom Classic version 7. Read my blog post and watch my other videos in there for more details. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel to show your support and to hear about new video tutorials. While you're at it, subscribe to my newsletter to get a free training video download and more. I'm Laura Shue.